Yeah, churns are always the worst because I think about the investment. I mean, when you have a win-loss, you have an investment, right, from the sales team or sales ops. But then when you lose a customer, you think about all the time that you went to implement that customer, to onboard
Yeah.
that customer, to provide them with the resources they needed to be successful, and they weren't.
Right.
So it's kind of a double whammy for sure.
Welcome to Win-Loss Analysis for Product Marketers. I'm Trenton Rumpf, the head of marketing at Closed, and joining me today on the podcast is
Scott Knudsen, the head of sales enablement at Closed. Closed, for those who don't know, everyone should know at this point, is the leading provider of win-loss analysis services and tech.
In this podcast, Scott and I, you guys know the drill, are going to talk about how product marketers can use win-loss analysis to succeed at reaching their top goals and initiatives.
We're talking things like win rate, sales enablement, product roadmap,
marketing efficiency, competitive intelligence, and especially today, churn and retention.
I thought about saying it at the same time as churn and retention, but I decided not to.
Yeah, I think we have already too much voice comparisons, and people know you have a cooler voice than me.
I don't know.
So we don't need to put it right on top of my voice. So for this episode, we thought it would be cool to also bring in Cameron Turnbow, who's one of the lead consultants at Closed and is managing a team of consultants and has also done thousands of buyer interviews and churn interviews, right?
Several
in
thousand.
total.
Several thousand
Yeah.
in total.
In total.
How many do you think, where are you at? Do you know the count?
We're over 2,000.
Over 2,000.
We're pushing 2,000. It's close.
That's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Single-handedly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not Closed. That's Cameron.
That's just
Individually,
Cameron.
yeah.
Exactly. And we wanted to bring you on because in this episode, we're talking about churn analysis. We've talked about using win-loss analysis methodology to help with churn analysis. And also, you're familiar with the Exactly story of using win-loss methodology to help with retention in their stay interviews, which is a pretty cool idea.
Right.
So what I wanted to do is just ask you a couple questions about if people are doing win-loss analysis or they're considering it and then they're thinking about churn analysis. What I wanted to understand from you is if I'm going to set up a churn analysis program, give me like the 3 major steps I need to do to implement that, right?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Whether I'm doing it internally as like DIY
Totally.
or how we do it when people hire us.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is you need to change your focus, right? Like, and when you're thinking obviously win-loss analysis, you may have heard this before where it's like win-loss analysis and like talking to new business deals, you're talking to customers that are judging you strictly based on perception, right? They haven't used your product. They've seen sales demos. Maybe they've done a POC, but it's strictly perception.
Sure.
Whereas churn brings in a whole different realm now where we're dealing with experience, right? It's not like you're just, the perception side where you're dating and you break up and like we think, there's a lot of thought that went into it. Whereas like churn is like, you guys were married, there was a divorce that happened and like you totally have separated. And so with that mentality, you can go so much deeper on the churn. And so a lot of times when we bring in these churn analysis with our customers, they're wanting more information on product, right?
Yeah.
That's like a really good case because
Makes
like
sense.
people in the new business deals, they get it from a high level where they're like, oh, the user interface, it looks good or it looks clunky. Whereas we can then go to the churn people and be like, hey, talk to us about that UI. What specific functionality did you like, right? And so that would be probably the first suggestion is like understanding that we're talking to people that have experience now, not just based on perception. With that, following that up to, making changes to what we would call the interview guide, the questions you're going to be asking, right? We can go a lot deeper with churn, right? If there's specific things you want to know about your product, let's go ask them, right? We can, obviously, I think it's still important to have those open-ended questions to figure out why they actually churned and lead with those. But usually we still have time throughout that interview where we can start to dig in to some things that maybe our product team wants to understand better, our marketing team wants to understand better. And so that would be my second suggestion there is really zero in on, okay, what are the questions we want to understand? Get specific with the product as well. And then the third thing that I would even suggest there is understand what that value prop was and understand where they went. Because if they went to another vendor, what was it for? Was it for that product, that product purpose? Was it specifically for the feature set or, was it a relationship? And by really diving into, that aspect, that's where we're going to start to see, okay, like this is more than just that new business one. There was a total relationship there. And that thing that they're mentioning as that decision driver is really that perceived value that trickles into every other part of the org, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's sales, people disguise it as price sometimes, but it really trickles into every other component as well. So that'd be kind of a couple suggestions I'd say.
So do you typically spend more time on a churn analysis interview? Like, do they actually go longer usually?
You know, it's we tend to keep most of our interviews to 30 minutes. We found that we can usually accomplish it in 30 minutes. Just there's not as much maybe in the initial uncovering phase. Usually we're going into those interviews with a little more background of saying, okay, they've been a customer for this long. It's still helpful, I think, to understand, why they chose our company or, our client's company in the first place. But then we can dive pretty deep into, okay, you're moving in a different direction. Tell me that story. What prompted you guys to even consider moving in a different direction? And then really get to that crux similar to the win-loss analysis of what were the key drivers that did push you away, right?
We talk about this a lot of when you talk about decision drivers. I think that's such a key point because without the interview, right, you're left with, okay, like, was it a relationship thing? Was it a product thing?
Right.
Was it a budget thing? Like, you just don't really know. Like, you can take an educated guess. Do you find that you kind of get an answer first, but then kind of by the end the interview, okay, this is really what it is?
Oh, all the time, yeah. And this goes from churn to also like, new business as well. I think churn's usually a little more well thought out just because the people we're talking to, they have that, because they have that relationship, they're a lot of times what we'll see on that one is that they'll bring up a factor that prompted the conversations to churn.
Right.
But then it was another reason that kind of led them to actually churn, right? And so maybe they're like, hey, we didn't like our account rep. Our account rep wasn't responsive. We felt like they weren't, the support team was poor. So that caused us to realize, like, to go out there and look to see what was out there.
That caused the stress.
Exactly. Yep. And then as they start looking out there, they realize, like, oh, wow, we're overpaying by $100,000 a year.
Right.
And then ultimately it comes down to like, well, we can move over, even with the switching costs, we're still saving $50,000 a year, right? And so you can kind of see how those tie together.
Yeah, that's interesting. So like one of the bad points triggers the question of, is this thing even valuable? Should we be paying for it anymore? And then they start to do more and more thought exercises.
Exactly.
On that.
Yep.
I'm really curious, have you ever had a win-loss analysis interview on the purchasing decision and then the same person or company in the churn analysis interview as well? Has that happened to you?
Not maybe. I can't think of anything off the top of my head in terms of like the same company.
Yeah, exactly.
What I did run into the other day though was they purchased it was a win-loss analysis, right? It was a loss for our client. But what essentially happened was during that evaluation process, they purchased a company and began trying to roll them out, and then broke up with that company after only 6 months in the implementation process. And then are now back in the initial stage of starting that all over again.
Gotcha.
And so we were able to kind of uncover, it wasn't necessarily our customer, but we were able to say, okay, you did move forward with this company. You're no longer with that company. Talk to us about that. What was that process like? And obviously their expectations weren't met through the implementation and the onboarding experience. And so that was kind of interesting to see that one come back where it's like, okay, we're starting right here. That's a lot of time and resources and money that they had to go through to try to implement it. And, even just to rip it out that quick, maybe props to them, who knows? We'll see how it all turns out, right?
That's
takes guys to rip it out that quick. But
yeah. The other thing I think that you said that is very interesting is, I know I've left vendors in the past, and that sounds like I was in a relationship with them. Like I've left so many vendors.
We're still in good terms.
We still talk. We're still friends.
We're still friends.
We're still friends, but I've left
totally
many
how it
vendors.
is.
And the interesting thing is I can't say for certainty if any of those vendors ever know if I just left and didn't go to another competitor. Like if I didn't replace the tool, or if I literally just left and we abandoned that initiative or that tool entirely.
Yeah.
So I love what you're saying about make sure when you're doing churn analysis, did they just cancel because they can't afford this solution anymore? They're not doing that initiative anymore. Yeah. Or did they cancel actually because they found a better alternative?
Totally.
Which one do you find more of?
Usually they go to a different vendor, but this kind of goes back to even with the win-loss side with the new business of, getting them to purchase, a competitor or doing nothing. That whole idea of no decision, right? And I think that's why this whole idea is so important, because if you're losing to no decision, that's a whole different issue to tackle than losing to a competitor, right? Because if you're losing to a competitor, you're in the right space. They see value in these types of solutions. Like it's usually there. If you're losing to no decision, they're having a hard time scraping a budget to pay for something like this. And, and maybe sometimes it is just internal. They have, reorg or something like that where it doesn't make sense to move forward at this time. The times where it gets scary though is where they're just like, hey, we haven't found the right solution yet, right? We haven't been able to meet their needs. We haven't been able to align what their pain points are and show how our solution meets that needs. And you might be on this side saying, it can do that, but that's where the gap comes in.
And I think that gap is really important because you as a vendor can think, oh, we are priced this way for a reason.
Yeah.
Yes, we're 100,000 more than this competitor, but for good reason, and they should know why because of X, Y, and Z. But if they're not experiencing that, one, you need to know that, hey, your customers are they're not experiencing what you think they should be.
Yeah.
And two, you may not know that other competitors, like as you said, like a lot of people are usually, if they're switching, they're not switching to like, we're just not going to do this anymore. They're like, no, we're going to pick a cheaper alternative or something that's a little more aligned or whatever. If they don't know that there are other solutions that are doing something more compelling than you and executing on it in a more effective way, you need to know that as a vendor. And so that's kind of the marrying of the two, the win-loss and the churn, right? Where it's like churn helps you kind of uncover like, wait a minute, there are these problems we're having.
Yeah.
Maybe these people that are switching to, let's start asking our customers, our existing customers, or the people who didn't buy, how much of an issue was that? Yeah. Oh, this is actually a huge issue. So you're able to kind of reinforce the data on both sides, which is cool.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, that's even going back to that example with Exactly, right? And that's something that they're doing really well is, being able to uncover those issues early on and realize, is this something we need to be thinking of? Yeah. Is this something that we should be concerned about? And the answer might be no, right? Like, but other times,
it's a one-off.
It's a one-off or something. But then other times it's like, oh wow, this could be something that is extremely harmful. But because they're identifying it so early, they got time to make adjustments.
Yeah, I love their approach of let's find those insights now, and then they really do a tailored approach. It sounded like of like one-to-one. Okay, we got the feedback from you, customer. And it sounds like you were unhappy or starting to be unhappy with these 3 things. Here's what we're doing to fix them. Totally. And they start to proactively message that instead of like, wait, you're going to churn? Well, we can fix it, I promise. They're like, let's do it. It's too late, right? Totally. Awesome.
I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to get back in shape. It's too late.
Well, and the annoying part is, the annoying part is that as you're probably hearing a lot of those things come back in the churn interviews or even like these current customer interviews that come back is, you can probably fix most of them.
Yeah.
Or your functionality, like I did one this morning where it's like, I paused, it was a closed one where it's like, I paused during the interview and said, hey, I'll have your consultant follow up because we actually do have this functionality. I don't want to derail the conversation, but we'll follow up on this and give you a little more information there. And by the time I even got off the call, she'd already reached out to her consultant saying, hey, we heard that you guys can do this. We're super interested, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
A lot of times it's just education even.
Yeah, that sounds critical. Cool. So to recap, if someone is going to start establishing a churn analysis program, remind me of the 3 things you said.
So I would say, A, make sure your perception's correct, right? Your mindset. You're thinking this is more based off of clients with experience rather than perception, right? Understand that you can go pretty, and that kind of leads into that second one is, you can go pretty deep with these people because they have that experience. So adjust the questioning for your interview guide or your questionnaire, whatever you want to call it, to be able to go deep, to be able to go detailed, but also keep in mind that those same principles still apply. We want to understand why they churned, right? That's the key reason. Don't get so in the weeds that you're asking questions that they don't really care about. Start with why they churned, and then obviously follow up with those detailed questions. And then the third one, I actually don't remember. So, would help me out. I'm going so great right now.
Be proactive. How about that?
Yeah, be proactive. There was something, but I don't know if it was probably just 2, and I was trying to drag it into a third one. So let's go with those 2 for sure. Does that sound good? Did I just ruin the podcast? There you go.
No, you made the podcast, Cam.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome, Cameron. Thanks for your time. We wanted to thank Cameron Turbo for coming on the podcast and sharing with us some of the best practices he's learned as one of our lead consultants here at Closed about churn analysis and how to properly set it up at a company and some of the best practices around it. And now we want to bring another consultant from Closed on named Jacob Michael, who we affectionately call Jake Mike. He's the first person I've ever met that shortens both his first and last name. And Jake has a great experience about one of our customers that started out doing win-loss analysis with us, and then also started doing churn analysis. And he has a really cool case study about this customer and their experience and some of the very neat things they're doing to help reduce their customer churn.
Hey everybody, I'm Jacob Michael, actually known as Jake Mike, so I'll go by both on this podcast. So.
So should I call you Jacob on this podcast? Is this like too official? You need to be Jacob?
It's Jacob Michael or Jake Mike, but it's not Jake Michael. That just doesn't go.
You can't do Jake Michael.
Yeah,
it's either very formal or
very informal,
all casual.
Yeah. There's full name or double nickname. You know,
most people don't abbreviate their last name, but that's what makes you unique.
That's
and
right.
special.
Exactly. When you have a first name as a last name, that happens, right?
Yeah, it does happen. Okay, I will try to stop doing the Jake Mike thing. Awesome. So as we mentioned, today we're going to talk about taking some of the same methodologies we talked about with win-loss analysis and applying them to after your customer leaves. So we like to relate this to dating.
Everything can come back.
Everything can come back to dating. So the way we relate it to dating is, in our minds, win-loss analysis is like the dating period, right? Like you got to know each other pretty well, but you weren't married. Like you didn't get married. It wasn't a divorce. And that's where we think of churn analysis. It's like you were a customer, you really knew each other, and then a divorce happened, and that's churn. Do you think that's a fair?
That's actually a great comparison.
Okay.
I mean, I think about like our response rates and like people we were able to get on the phone, and it's more difficult to get a hold of churn interviews because they've typically often had a negative experience and stuff. And so I think that's a great comparison, you know?
Yeah.
So that's a good,
I like
it.
I think it's also applicable in the cost of it, right? If I break up with a girlfriend.
Sure.
I'm at a couple dinners.
I haven't heard of a dating prenup.
Exactly. Yeah. You go through a divorce. That is not a cheap process.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Same with your business. Churn is a very costly affair.
Yeah. Let's dive into that a little bit more. I would love to just take a minute and think about the overarching impact on costs with churn, right? A lot of times we just think, oh, that sales deal, that 1 year of revenue left, but it's actually much bigger than that.
Totally.
And some of those things that I like to think of is, especially on the marketing side, like I just lost word of mouth and a reference, and maybe I even have a detractor now in the market.
Yeah, churns are always the worst because I think about the investment. When you have a win-loss, you have an investment right from the sales team or sales ops, but then when you lose a customer, you think about all the time that you went to implement that customer, to onboard that customer, to provide them with the resources they needed to be successful, and they weren't. Right. So it's kind of a double whammy for sure.
Yeah. The other thing too is that there is now a void that has to be filled, right? And so all the customer acquisition costs from the beginning, right? The lead, the cost of the lead,
right,
to the training of the sales reps, to implementation and the cost of the burden of the company takes for a lot of implementations, depending on what you do, only to just refill what you lost. You're not even getting more stuff.
Right. So we wanted to talk a little bit about, from your experience, Jake, using win-loss methodologies to do churn analysis and some of the experience you've had doing that at Closed. But before we go there, I want to ask you, Jake, have you ever had a churn horror story?
Yeah,
or a hero story.
Well,
maybe
like
you're a
mix.
hero.
This is kind of a mix. So we before I joined here, I was a customer success manager at a firm that had clients across the globe, and we had quite a large institution we were working with. It was probably our largest institution in that specific region, right? So definitely like the fact that this client was our customer was well known amongst the marketplace, and there was some things that happened, and they were going to churn, and losing this account was going to be devastating because it was like they were our foothold in that market.
Yeah.
And so we kind of rang the bell and kind of all hands on deck. And this is during COVID, so we couldn't go up there. They were located in North America somewhere. It's very vague, very vague.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We're trying not to say exactly who this person
exactly.
is. Yeah,
it was Omaha. It was a mutual, you could say.
No. So anyways, we called all hands on deck, and I think they appreciated that we acknowledged the faults and that I think we'd promised some things that had not able to come to pass from a product development standpoint. Mm-hmm. And they liked that a lot. And I think the fact that we had brought in a bunch of executives from our side, and we had gone through a massive acquisition, and we just were able to have the frank conversation. Hey, look, this is what we did wrong. This is what we told you. And basically to lay out a game plan of how we were going to fix those items. They really were appreciative of that. And so it is kind of a hero story, right? Mm-hmm. We were able to save them. They renewed for another, 3-year contract. and eventually, again, continued to help us in that specific region of the country. So it was definitely a positive experience. It's from a negative to a huge like win.
Yeah. So it was like a all-time classic horror movie where at the beginning everyone's dying. It's very scary.
Exactly.
And then eventually the hero comes along
Yes.
named Jacob Michael.
No, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. I was just one ringing the bell. Like, hey,
Oh,
let's
cool.
get the whole town out here to fix this.
That's great. So it kind of was you, actually. Awesome. So let's dive into that a little bit. Let's talk about methodologies to help reduce churn, right? So in your guys' experience, what are some ways to reduce churn and to help retention?
So you talked about a great one, which is we got to get executive support. We got to basically throw bodies at this problem, which is typically the first line of defense, right? I think there is a growing market of customer success, client success tools out there that are trying to be more on the proactive side and saying, things like Gainsight or client success, where they're, can we find leading indicators of churn, right? Can we give a health score? If they're submitting tickets and they're having, quarterly business reviews, things like that, that might increase their health score. If they're not talking to us at all, if they're going dark, that puts them at risk, right? So I think there's a lot of tools out there that can help kind of identify potential problems.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, it's all a large part just about the relationship, right? So, Jake, I know that you have a program, and this customer shared their story with us about how they've used our methodologies to initially do churn analysis, and this company is called Exactly. Can you set the stage a little bit, and then we can dive a little bit deeper into how you guys did this?
Yeah, so Exactly, they're obviously a SaaS platform. They wanted to kind of do some analysis of their churn, really kind of to apply close beyond just win-loss and to understanding, okay, why are customers leaving us? Where can we improve there? And they took that and expanded it beyond to just churn, but also to customer experience interviews, current customers. They call those stay interviews. So these are current customers. And I think it's really a huge benefit to them because it's really helped them understand. They're getting a third party to sit in front of their customers and have the conversation and ask what is going well, what is not, and then being able to implement the actionable insights from those conversations.
Awesome. So we started with win-loss analysis with Exactly.
Correct.
Then they were like, we need help with churn analysis.
Yes.
And then they decided, hey, actually, let's get ahead of this and be proactive before they churn and do stay interviews. That's what they're calling it?
That's exactly right.
That's cool.
They wanted to kind of get ahead of that, and they wanted to kind of, hey, let's focus on customers who maybe are renewing in the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
Have the conversation beforehand, just like you said, kind of get ahead of things to be able to understand, are there any pain points or any landmines that we're not aware of that we need to address and make sure that we are acknowledging.
I think this is a good point. So especially if you're a product marketer out there and you're thinking, okay, well, I'm not in customer success. How do I make an impact here, right? Ultimately, everyone knows churn's expensive, right? Costs a company a bunch. And similar to how you can impact the sales department or the product department from, in some ways, guiding that energy and guiding that focus. Part of what Close presents is like, hey, you probably don't have the time to do this. Someone needs to kind of scope this out. And I think I love what Exactly implemented there, where they said, hey, first let's diagnose the problems, and then let's come up with a system or come up with a process where we can ensure that we don't have those problems in the future, right? So the stay interview, right? Someone had to spearhead that, right? Someone had to take the initiative, right? And that could be a product marketer who, it could be anyone, right? Anyone listening could step into those shoes and say, hey, here's this great resource. Again, for us, it's a third party saying, hey, they can do all this heavy lifting for us, and then we can use that as ammunition to fix these problems.
And on that note, just for product marketers too, I think one thing they've done, and I think they addressed it in the video, is that they have basically, those current customers who are very excited and very, happy, praising, Exactly. They're actually kind of including them into, hey, let's include you in a product development program or a customer advocacy board and things like that. So it's definitely cool to see them take it and grow it.
That's awesome. So let's listen to this, and then I've got a couple follow-up questions for you that I'm curious about. This is Nancy White and Kathy Hassett at Exactly sharing exactly the story that we just shared from Exactly.
Exactly.
How many times can I say exactly? Here we go.
So we had initially started working with Close, at least from the customer success perspective, to do some churn interviews. And we had engaged with the team for a few months doing the churn interviews. We had some success with those, but at the same time, we were also starting an internal initiative to really focus on customer health and trying to identify and make sure we were aware of all of the customers that we thought were our at-risk customers. And we're trying to figure out ways to gather more information and details from those customers as to what we could potentially do to improve their health and make sure we could put a good action plan in place. So we pulled together a list of customers that we considered or thought were our at-risk customers, and started doing some interviews there. We found that while we had tried to get information from customers on our own, sometimes customers are a little more closed in terms of what they'll share with us. And so we thought the idea of using a third party for this type of interview could help to uncover some details that they just weren't sharing with us. So we started down the path of focusing on some at-risk customers. As we started to see some success there and really started to see the type of information we were able to glean from those interviews, then we really thought we should broaden our approach a little bit. And we thought it would be great to look at our customer base as a whole, and figured that there were probably a number of customers out there that were at risk and maybe we weren't aware yet. But even if they weren't at risk, we thought that we could gain a lot of good, valuable information by talking with these customers and doing what we were calling kind of stay interviews. What's going well? What's not going well? What are areas for improvement? And how can we ensure that we retain those customers? Are they currently thinking of renewing with us? Are they maybe on the fence? Or are there maybe some out there that are already looking at other options that we weren't aware of? So we wanted to broaden it, and we ended up broadening it out to a number of other customers that were just customers that were going to be coming up for renewal. That's what we targeted initially, coming up for renewal in the next few quarters. So we could start to get ahead and get information on all of our customers.
So she actually answered the question that I had. When you were telling me the story, I had this question in my mind, so I'm sure other people did, of, well, wait, like, you should have a really good, strong relationship with your customers. And so why the heck would you hire a third party to interview your customers? Like, I understand on the churn, maybe you had a negative experience. They don't want to talk to you anymore. Like, they're gone. That's why you hire a divorce attorney. But,
or a therapist, right?
Yeah,
Or-
exactly. Either one.
Exactly.
So tell me your experience. You've actually interviewed these customers on these stay interviews. Talk to me a little bit about like how open you feel they are versus maybe what they tried to do, and some of the feedback that Kathy and Nancy have told you.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been interesting, right? Because I think when I've been on calls with Kathy and Nancy after, I've just had an interview, and it's just, you hear them like, wow, why didn't they just tell us that or something like that?
Yeah.
And I think there's maybe some type of psychology of like, hey, I'm talking to someone who's not, I don't have a financial relationship with you, right? And being able to just maybe be open about that. I think also our interview methodology really does kind of akin to like make sure these conversations are naturally flowing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you always try to build rapport. And it really is kind of interesting when you dig into some of these issues or these problems that they have, and really kind of when these answers that they have bubble up, and then you ask a follow-up question, and the information they provide is really outstanding. And then you go and review it with Kathy and Nancy, and they review it internally with the CSM and and put together an action plan of like, hey, how can we address these concerns in a way that's going to ensure that this customer renews, right? And it's definitely kind of very cool to see.
That's amazing.
I think there's definitely, you mentioned there's a psychological thing. I call it the Instagram bad haircut, which is,
Please tell me more.
which is, there are lots of times when somebody posts, I got a new haircut, check it out. And you don't see any person ever being like,
Yes.
this looks
Yeah.
bad.
Yep.
It's everyone
Sure.
being like, yeah, it's great. Oh my gosh, that's the best haircut
Yeah,
I've ever
sure.
seen, right?
Yeah.
When you have an established relationship with someone, sometimes if you're that type of person who can be totally frank with them, great, they're going to get that feedback. But often, you know them, they just had a kid 6 months ago. You don't want to break the news to them like, hey, actually, we kind of hate this product.
Right.
We're not really we're probably not going to renew, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's an emotional element there. When you're talking to a third party, you can air it out, man. And again, I talked about this last episode. It's why Yelp works as a platform. It's very rare that you have a bad soup some people will go up and tell everyone like, this is terrible, or it's just okay, right? It's a lot more likely that you will go to a third-party platform and be like, I didn't really care for this, and here's why.
Yeah.
You know, the service wasn't as great as I
Exactly.
thought it was going to be, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You're a lot more inclined to be open and honest and transparent when you're talking to somebody who doesn't have a vested interest into like trying to talk you out of it or change your mind or give you concessions on like, oh no, actually this and that, right? Like if you feel the way you feel, and so yeah, I imagine in your situation, you can kind of get a little more of that dirty laundry, so that you can position it back to the company, and be like, hey, like this is how your customers feel.
Yeah. The other point, sorry, Jake, that you brought up earlier is the time involved,
Right.
which goes right in hand with the point that you brought, is the expertise of interviewing. Like, I can't imagine there's a ton of CSMs out there that are actually really good at interviewing and digging deep. Maybe they are. Maybe I just haven't had that experience with them, but they haven't been trained thoroughly on how to do a bunch of win-loss interviews or churn interviews, or now these stay interviews, and really dive deep and figure out the nuance of what's the real reason you're thinking about leaving, or you're thinking of staying, or you already left, or the deal was won and lost, right? So I think just the time commitment, like who is going to go do these stay interviews? The third party, like I'm more willing to tell somebody that I don't have that relationship with the full story, and then the interviewing skill, like the ability to pull that full story out. So I think that answers my question of why would somebody hire another company instead of just doing these interviews themselves?
Right.
And I will caveat too, it's not always negative, right? Like it's not always the negative, but I think they also uncover some positive nuggets, right? That like they were not aware of, and like, hey, this is something you need to continue to repeat with other customers because it's really going well here. And then also kind of some of the opportunities as well, like, hey, this customer is singing your praises, like maybe we can involve them with a, you know, your product team to help to develop the next, you know, version of the product, right? Or hey, let's have them also go post this review to Gartner or some other type of platform to get the word out, right? So it's not just in case within close. And so I definitely some positives as well there as well.
And I want to re-emphasize, you said time commitment. I've worked at probably 5 SaaS companies, and I would argue that every time, if there's one department that is like, we have no bandwidth, like I have so many customers, I'm sure you could attest to this, right? Like the customer success teams, they always have too many
100%.
They always have too many, they have no time to do anything, right? Sales reps, they got time, right? They get a little more time.
That's not what they tell me.
Yeah. But customer success, like they have no time. And so to be like, hey, could you also, with that no time you have, do 45-minute deep interviews it's like, when could I do that?
Right. Yeah.
Hey, do a stay interview with your happy customer when they're already like, well, I know they're happy. Why am I going to do that?
Yeah,
and then it's awkward at that point because like, you know, you're just,
Yeah.
So it's,
that's a good point. Well, awesome. Jake, thanks for talking about that with us today. What I would love to hear is more of these horror stories or really cool churn stories.
Horror or hero? I like that.
Horror or hero. Were you the villain or were you the hero? Good or bad? I'd love to hear the stories. So email me at trenton@close.com. It's TRENTON@CLOZD.com. And with your story, it could be a colleague, because I know a lot of product marketers here probably weren't the villain or the hero in a churn story. But give me the best one you've got, and I'll select my favorite and send that person a $50 gift card. Jake, thanks for joining us. That's the episode today.
happy. Thanks, guys.
See ya.